Today we're gonna talk about the co-founders agreement, what it is, why it is so important, especially when you are preparing to go into the United States market. And can you briefly introduce yourself, what you do, how you are involved with co-founders, and then I will, ask you a bunch of questions that I hear constantly from founders, co-founders whom I work with. And I also have my own questions to have a discussion with you based on when it's necessary to have this agreement and what aspects should be put in that agreement. But first of all, let us know who you are, like let the audience know who you are and how you can help them.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. So glad to be here, excited to be here. I love talking about, in general, love SaaS and specifically co-founder agreements is something that I greatly enjoy talking about because I'm a person who highly values relationships. And so my name's Omeed, and I am the managing partner at Optimist Legal. We are a corporate business law firm that primarily helps SaaS founders with raising money and exiting their business or selling their business. We do everything in between there too, but those two primary areas are what we focus on helping SaaS founders with because those are, the big milestones in the journey. Obviously, we can help with customer contracts and starting the business and so on and so forth, but we're corporate lawyers. That's what we do. So I'm here today to talk about the co-founder agreement, why it's important, the challenges, the problems, and what people can expect from the conversation today is they'll know what the terms are, they'll know how the terms work, they'll know various strategies and approaches to the terms that go into the co-founder agreement, and we'll talk about how and why the co-founder agreement is so important for the fundraising process as well. So glad to
Yeah.
be here. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. You touched those points that are really, sorry for the expression, pain in the ass when it comes like into the bad situation. And if you don't have that agreement set up, too many disputes, too many hard feelings, and unlogical decisions in the business happens if you don't just have that. And meanwhile, I would like to discuss when it is the right time to discuss the co-founders agreement. And let me share my thoughts on that and what I see and what I hear talking with early stage SaaS founders. So when you don't have the business, you don't have any problems. The business is not generating money and nobody's envy of your share. And that's fine. That seems like legit. And when I coach SaaS founders, we are looking to get, first of all, 4 key milestones so that the business starts getting some kind of attraction. The first milestone is to get real world feedback. So whether your idea makes sense or not, so that you can build a product that customers not just love, but they are ready to pay for. The next milestone is to prepare your revenue ready demo. You don't have the product yet, but you have very clear idea, vision. You can showcase your wireframe, your demo. There's not product yet, but everyone and your prospects could understand and feel, yeah, I want to put my, dollars on that. And I want guys, you to build the solution and bring me that. So it provides us already some kind of attraction. So, and they might get some tension like, hey, we are already kind of like selling our solution. We are onto something. Maybe this is the right time to get on co-founders agreement. Maybe not yet. The next milestone is when we do so-called early adopters advantage. We create the offer for early adopters and say, well, this product is not built yet, but here's the special deal. It will cost, $1,000, but you can get it for $500 right now, plus all mumbo jumbo stuff on that. And, show me the money. Then the actual
Mhm.
money comes in, or actual contracts are being signed with customers. And the final step is we are building the customer waiting list. So you're not ready to put your dollars right now. You don't believe in us or whatever, the obstacles are on the way. But you want to know when the product is actually launched, and you want to get at least some kind of like a discount, some kind of a bonus to be among those first guys, not the very first guy, but among those. Like, cool, we are building the waiting list. And here comes already some kind of tension between founders. So if one founder is tech founder, developer, he says, well, I still have to code like, let's say like 200 hours to build a solution or whatever it is. And that guy who's like business developer says, come on, I already brought 100 customers in. They are already waiting for our product. So it seems like I did a heavier lifting and you still, have to put 100 hours. And now we get tension in terms of how much effort I put, how much effort you put, and how much the result we got from each of our effort. So in terms of that framework, in terms of those 4 milestones, where would you see the most rational to start discussing the agreement?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, okay, so there are a couple different thoughts here. Now, if you
Yeah.
were to ask me from my perspective, what I advise people, and any lawyer that you really talk to is going to say the earlier the better. Okay. Um, Now, if you were to take it from like a dating perspective, if you were to like equate being co-founders to dating, maybe you want to wait, for example, for a little bit of time before you have the conversation around marriage. And that's often actually how co-founders typically operate, right? Hey, let's wait until we know that this is going to work and so
Yeah.
on and so forth, is what I heard you say in terms of, okay, wow, this is working. Now there's like a little bit of tension between the co-founders because now they're in the relationship. But from a prudent perspective, from the perspective of best practice, my suggestion to founders is always, if this is a person that you want to work with, the best practice is, okay, maybe you don't actually put the co-founder agreement on paper, but at least start having a conversation
Hmm.
with the co-founder and having those really difficult, truthful conversations. So, what's my contribution going to be? What's your contribution going to be? What's your time availability going to be? What's my time availability going to be? How many hours are you going to put in? How many hours am I going to put in? Who makes the decisions? How do we make the decisions? So there needs to be some level of conversation and understanding between the founders about this from the very beginning of the relationship. Because what you don't want to happen is the business starts taking off and then the tension arises
Hmm.
and you try to fix the tension once the tension is there. You stay ahead of the ball by having the conversation early.
So the longer you delay that unpleasant conversation, what's in it for you, what's in it for me, the harder it's get to accomplish it. So that's the problem.
Especially when there's something at stake, right?
Hmm.
When there's something at stake, people tend there's more, yeah, as you mentioned, there's more stakes in the game. So, people feel very differently about it. And we're going to discuss, various different approaches. There are some approaches that are more, prudent than others in determining what you get, what I get, and so on and so forth. That might be better for later stage conversations. But in general, best practice is have the conversations early, have the conversations often, because it's actually really going to tell you who the person across the table from you is. And you'll get to see a side of them and you'll get to know them in a way from the very beginning in terms of who you're dealing with and what they're about and whether your values align, which is what really will determine, relationship for the long term. Because that's what the co-founder agreement is. It's a governing document for the relationship.
Exactly. What I heard from at least a couple of founders from different startups, they went that way that you suggested. They had some negotiations, some kind of like agreement. If I spend, this much of time and I should get this, let's avoid sharing 50-50 because we will get into the trap. Like when we can't make the decision, either we have like three co-founders or let's split like 40-60 or whatever, like overcome that. But what I liked from their conversation, and so at least two startups mentioned me that after they did that discussion, they sent an email like to just to double check to confirm. So Omeed, as discussed, this is how I understood our like mutual agreement. Bam, 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 bam. That's it. It's not like a co-founders agreement yet, but it's like a foundation of what we expected.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, memorializing those key conversations is incredibly important. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a formal document in the early stages. I often hear from startup founders, "Oh, I don't want to spend the money to draft a co-founders agreement. I don't want to spend the money to draft the operating agreement before I know that this business will actually return in the way that I expect it to." If that's you, that's fine. There are various people who have various different risk tolerances in terms of when they want to incorporate, when they actually want to start the business, when they want to, get the necessary founding documents. Some people like getting it at the very beginning. Other people like waiting until the business is relatively validated and they know that this is something that they want to spend the next 5 to 10 years on. I don't recommend waiting until then, but if that's you, as you mentioned, get something in place, which is a key summary of terms of discussions, because should anything happen down the road, which it does often, and I'll tell you a few of those kind of horror stories in our
Mm-hmm.
conversation today. You want to make sure that you have that summary of terms in hand, because the last thing that you want is to go off of either verbal conversations or conversations that you've never had before.
Yeah, okay. And you already mentioned the horror stories. I don't want to jump too fast ahead, but I also heard a couple of those and like from different angles. Like one angle was when they built actually the product, they coded the software, but the software was any good. Like customers were not ready to put even a single dollar on that. And that co-founder said, gosh, I've spent, half of my life, no, kind of like half of my life for building that stuff, and you can't sell it. So, and they split, they aren't happy, and they aren't friends anymore. That's the tragedy. But they were friends before that, and they simply went out. And I also heard other kind of like horror stories, maybe like unfair behavior stories. So when the co-founder, who is like the business developer, he goes and does the actual sales, secures at least like protocols of intentions and etc. And another co-founder who is developer says, I need a year to build that stuff. And the business founder, the business developer knows that, gosh, this guy won't build a super robust software within here because he's a single person and he can't manage that. He still has the day job. And that business developer says, well, why not hire a company, a development company? The developer feels like his ambitions, cut down. Well, can't you trust me, whatever? And where is my equity in that? And again, they split their ways. And the relationship, the friendship is actually ruined. The problem. So I don't know, would the co-founders agreement save them in such situations?
So in that instance, okay, so to recap your story, essentially there was a business developer and there was a coder. The
Yeah.
business developer went and validated the product in the market, saw that there was a market for the product, and then the technical co-founder was slow moving in, developing the product, right?
Yeah.
So, so one of the safeguards in place, not so much for the technical co-founder, but more for the business developer, because in that instance, okay, they decided that they were going to work together, but if the technical co-founder hasn't built anything yet, have they really earned the right to ownership in that company, depending on who came up with the idea, for example? Obviously that's important, that sort of thing. But if the technical co-founder's role is to create the product, develop the product, and they haven't developed the product yet, there is a concept known as vesting.
Mm.
So with respect to equity, usually, the recommendation and what investors will want to see in general is that all people that are a part of the company will be subject to vesting, including the founders. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that the equity that is granted is earned, so that it's not just taken just because you're, a part of the company. And that's what all of these different models of equity are. For example, splitting the pie, which I think is one of
Mm.
the models that we're going to talk about today. And,
Yeah.
I have a few other models that I can share as well. But yeah, vesting, a cliff. It's incredibly important that both co-founders, or however many co-founders there are all subject to these terms to ensure that the equity that's granted is earned. And the investors are going to want to see that, because they're not going to invest in a company where one of the founders can run off and they haven't actually put in the work necessary to earn that equity that they have been granted.
Mhm. That's already great that we touch possible frameworks, how to split the equity, how to define what is fair enough. And I'm not a lawyer, but I already witnessed few cases when startups used slicing a pie methodology. In one case, they used that official tool. They paid some kind of subscription for that and to have nice and fancy stuff, while others, they simply had the Excel spreadsheet. And they simply put their input like, hey, I spent so many hours on developing our software, and you agree that my hour is worth this amount of money per hour. And okay, it means I've put this much of value. While other founder says, well, I'm going and trying to validate. So I do sales calls, I do sales meetings, I do some kind of marketing stuff, and this is how much I've time invested. And they have that Excel spreadsheet, which is changing constantly. And both founders are motivated to put more of their skin in the game, because the more I put my effort, the more equity I will have. Maybe today it's 50-50 because we share just an idea of building that, but tomorrow you will have 60% of the pie and I will have only 40, and it motivates me. Hey, gosh, let me put some some energy into moving that forward. So is it often case when founders apply slicing pie methodology or similar methodologies so that the involvement of the founder, co-founder is actually related with the shares, with stocks that he gets? You already mentioned vesting, but maybe there is more in this topic.
Yeah, so slicing the pie isn't, the standard
Yeah.
approach in Silicon Valley or just generally amongst founders. Um, Slicing the pie, it it it's positioned as, the most equitable, most fair way to split equity. And, that obviously is one of the biggest pros around it. Now, the challenges around splitting the pie or slicing the pie are going to be, identifying what constitutes the slices, for example, like, time, contributions, these sorts of things, like identifying those specific slices and getting agreement on that is one of the challenges. Another challenge is you have to be trained in the methodology. So because of its changing nature, there needs to be a constant inventory that's being taken on, each of the person's contributions. And so there needs to be someone, and the instances, actually, to be honest, I've actually never had a client use the slicing the pie methodology. I've heard of it. I've heard of it for many years and I've seen it and I've come across it, but I've actually never met a founder that has actually used the slicing the pie methodology. Most of the founders that I work with usually just do, they come to terms by agreement. So they're like, okay, I'm going to put XYZ initial capital contribution in, and I'm going to do XYZ number of hours. You're going to be, the primary manager of the company. So you get, 85% and I get 15%, for example. Or, I see a lot of like 50-50 splits, obviously, or one third, one third, one third. So kind of these like simpler splits. But with slicing the pie, I think it is totally workable if, first of all, everyone has to be bought in to the
Mhm.
methodology. There needs to be a really strong understanding of the methodology. There needs to be one person at least that's responsible for the management of the methodology, such that quarterly, a meeting is being called between, the founders, and they're distributing, the slices so that the distribution is constantly being updated. And then obviously the challenge is going to be oftentimes what we see time and time again. This is a horror story for you. I've seen this so many times. Two founders, and they start out, they're very excited, and then what ends up happening is one of the founders is very committed to the business and they give all of their time, they give all of their energy, and for whatever reason, the other founder isn't.
Mhm.
But what happens is when the two founders talk to each other, the one that's not putting the effort and the time and the energy verbally will say, yes, I'm very committed and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Sometimes that founder will even show up to all of the meetings and it will give the appearance. And it's very confusing for the other founder. I've seen this so many
Mhm.
times where one of the founders that's doing all of the effort is like, this makes no sense. This person is saying that they're committed. This person is, shows up to meetings, but in terms of work product, they're not
Mhm.
producing
Yeah, they're
anything.
scratching the nose, or at least not. They're not working as fast as they should. So how do you suggest solving that? Can it be solved with co-founders agreement, or could it be just, I don't know, like taking the consultant, an advisor, like to be like an arbitrage between us? I don't know.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? Does it actually happen?
Yeah, so the co-founders agreement, as I mentioned, vesting is a really great is a great mechanism to prevent that. You know, if they don't actually own any of the shares in the company yet, because for example, you know, there's a 4 year vest period, there's a 1 year cliff. That 1 year,
Mhm.
especially with that 1 year cliff, during that 1 year, you're going to see. You're going to see how much effort they put in. You're going to see how they show up. You're going to see whether they're scratching their nose or giving lip service or whether they're actually producing. So with that 1 year cliff, and what a 1 year cliff is for all the people, you know, out there is so the shares don't start vesting until the first year has gone by from the agreement. So after year one, you know, the person will get, for example, 25% of their shares, and then the remainder of the 75% of the shares will vest, you know, one over however months are remaining for the vesting period. That's a bit confusing, like to speak to verbally, but it essentially means that the person doesn't start earning their shares until a year has gone by after the agreement. So that's one of the best ways to, and like I said, if all of the founders are subject to the vesting and the cliff, then you know it's fair. I'm gonna be subject to it. You're gonna be subject to it. We're both subject to it. This is the period of time. We know what our equity is. We're gonna earn it as long as we're still here for the period of you know whatever the subject period is. And as long as we're doing the things that we promise, that's why the conversation around, hey, you know, this is what you're gonna do, this is what I'm gonna do, this is how much time I'm gonna give, so on and so forth. That's why, you know, putting the key summary points onto like an email so that you can point to it and be like, listen, you said that you were going to do these things. You said that you were
Mhm.
going to, you know,
Yeah.
spend this amount of
If you
time.
did
You
it
haven't.
or not, and that's the answer. Should you, you know, start your stocks like coming into your account, or gosh, Donatas, you haven't done that. So either you will do what you expected, you know, what we expected from you to do, and what you said that you will do, or you are not a co-founder anymore. That or you will get, you know, smaller slice of our shares.
And what I often see is, and you know, for all the people out there, don't do this. Um, a lot of people, okay, one of the difficulties of the co-founder is it's a relationship, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes you're friends, as you mentioned. And so a lot of people just hold on to the hope that the other person at some point will start
Delivering what was
working,
agreed.
delivering. Yeah. And so they just won't have that difficult conversation. And so I think one of the most important aspects of having a co-founder is the skill of being able to have difficult conversations with your co-founder. The co-founder agreement is in place for protection so that if anything goes wrong, the necessary protections are in place. But if you're not being proactive, if you don't have the communication skills, if you don't have the relationship skills, if you're not developing those skills, the co-founder agreement isn't going to protect you that much. You actually have to be putting it into practice.
It's not
If
the
the
holy
person's
grail, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Like it's not going to have the conversation for you. It's not going to, you know, go tell the co-founder like, "Hey, you're not producing." You actually have to have that conversation with your co-founder. And then if the conversation doesn't go well, the co-founder agreement will have the necessary mechanisms to be able to address what to do in that instance.
So when would you suggest to sign the official co-founders agreement?
Yeah, I really think that if you're going to, when you know that this is a business that you want to work on with someone, that is really the best time that, you know, so that for some people that might be earlier.
Hmm.
For some people that might be, you know, once the, you know, initial maybe MVP is released. But if you're going to be spending years working with someone, you need to have the co-founder agreement in place. So for a lot of people that might be at the incorporation stage. And what's interesting about the co-founder agreement is so co-founder agreements can be structured a couple different ways. They can actually maybe be broken out into three different agreements so that it could be broken out into the operating agreement or the bylaws. Then there could be a co-founder agreement, and then there could be like a proprietary inventions assignment agreement. Or, you know, some people kind of mash it all into the operating agreement or the bylaws into one document. So it can be structured, you know, various different ways.
What I heard from talking to multiple founders, but again, not from legal aspects, but more from marketing, from scaling, and after they got their initial traction, they are preparing for scaling, like expanding globally in different country markets. They are looking for investment, and investors, in quite many cases, they raise the red flag if co-founders haven't set their relationships officially. What I mean by that, we with Omeed agreed that we will have like 50-50. You are a developer, I'm a marketer, or whatever. Okay, let's go get some funding and we will go and conquer the US market. And investor said, guys, wait a second. This is unclear for us. So what's going to happen if Omeed leaves or if Donatas leaves and he takes his stocks out, or if he's not performing, how we can replace him? Will he get like that equity in any case, or whatever it is? So what do you see from the legal side, and when it comes to fundraising, what actually needs to be done, what needs to be already in place when we are just about to get funding for scaling? I'm not talking about funding for building the MVP and to test out the waters with our idea, but we already have some kind of traction. We need to expand. We are raising for Series A, okay, maybe like pre-A series, but whatever. What's your take on that, and what's experience like? What are the best practices and what are the worst cases, the scenarios that we should avoid?
You're not going to raise funding from an accredited investor or an institutional investor without the necessary agreements in place. Any investor that does due diligence on your company, the necessary documents are
Mhm.
going to be there prior to the investment being made. So for a lot of entrepreneurs, for a lot of founders, that looks like the necessary documents having to be drafted during the due diligence process because the investor identifies they have a checklist, and we actually have a
Mhm.
checklist too that we use. So are these documents here? Are the necessary board resolutions in place? Are the necessary consents in place? Are the necessary founders agreements in place? Does the certificate of incorporation say the things that it needs to? Does the bylaws, does the operating agreement say the things that it needs to? Have the founders assigned their ownership interests to the intellectual property to the company? Have the founders have they delineated their roles? Have they taken their equity share? All of these things will absolutely need to be in place in order to receive any sort of substantial funding from an institutional investor that actually does due diligence on your company. So to answer your question,
Mhm.
for sure for Series A, 100%, there's no way that the founders
Yeah.
agreement,
You can't
can't
skip
be in
that.
place.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's not a shortcut you should be thinking of. And let me ask an unpleasant question. How much does it cost to have this
Yeah.
agreement? Because some founders are, oh, let's save our money, instead of wasting on lawyers, let's invest, I don't know, in marketing or hiring extra developer because it's hectic expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. So, our incorporation package, for example, starting the company, operating agreement or bylaws, initial founding documents, PIIA, and the necessary authorizing resolution. So all of those things is 2,500. So
Mm,
it's not incredibly expensive at
yeah.
all. The founders agreement itself is like 4 pages or something like that. So, you're looking at 700, $800 for the founders agreement.
Mm. And we promised that you will have some kind of like a gift for those who will watch. So what is this gift and how they could, claim that gift?
Yeah, totally. So would be happy to share a template co-founders agreement with people. Just make sure that you find me on LinkedIn, message me co-founder, and I will respond to those messages with your free template co-founder gift.
Yeah. And I would suggest, because we are running this and do the recording of the event, we will probably place it, I don't know, either on YouTube or on any other social media. So reach out to Omeed in the message if possible, right? What he said, like co-founder agreement, and you will get like the response from Omeed. But I would suggest, if you're watching this video on any other platform, you can simply put the comment down below wherever you are watching it. So from time to time, we will put an eye on it. So if you commented here, if you can't find us on LinkedIn, we can also do the follow up with you.
Awesome. Yeah. It also, like, if you want to just if you put it on YouTube, feel free to like put my LinkedIn
Mm,
link in the YouTube description or whatever.
yep.
That also would be like a great way for people to find me too.
Yeah, that's cool. And could you share with us some horror stories, as you mentioned? Not to
Yeah.
scare off people, but to make aware, guys, don't do this mistake or that mistake. And uh, maybe it's very subjective opinion, but for me, $2,500, it's not that much to take the risk that you will ruin the relationship with your co-founders, you ruin the business, you waste your time finding another one co-founder or starting everything from, maybe not stage zero, but very, very downgraded version of it. But in any case, so any horror stories, mistakes to avoid with co-founders agreement.
Totally. I have a lot. So, okay. So, horror story. Gather round. I have a
Yeah.
ghost story.
Yeah. Founders gather around. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so there were these two founders, and these two founders initially had a great relationship in the beginning. They found each other like through a mastermind group. And they were introduced by some like very like trusted people. And in the beginning, they had really fantastic relationship. They worked for 2, 3 months validating their product idea. This was like for an e-commerce store that they were launching together. And so 2, 3 months, they're validating the idea for the e-commerce store. They work together really well. And then they went to go for financing, and they just found some template operating agreement off the internet that they downloaded. It
They
was just
took
like
they took the shortcut. Like,
yeah, they
okay.
and so they downloaded, they Googled operating agreement for their LLC. They downloaded some template operating agreement. They made like all of these changes to it, but the terms didn't reflect what their actual agreement was. And for whatever reason, because the financing required them to have certain terms, so they made a side agreement between the two of them that was verbal, but the actual document didn't reflect the ownership percentage. It didn't reflect the roles. It had,
Wow.
a bunch of terms that were very unfavorable. Like, for example, the managing member of the company could involuntarily, upon their will, just remove the other person and purchase their shares, for example. Like, there was a lot of
Wow.
language in there. And originally, one of the other partner was supposed to get a much larger ownership percentage, but as I mentioned, the financing requirements didn't initially let them have that ownership percentage. So they got a much smaller ownership percentage than what they had actually agreed on. The other partner was supposed to be the CEO of the company, but because the one of the founders was doing a personal guarantee on the financing, they had to be the managing
Gosh.
member. So after they received the financing, what happened was they were like, okay, now we want to amend the operating agreement and actually make it look the way that it's supposed to. My ownership share is supposed to be 3 times larger than what it says in that
Mm,
agreement. I'm supposed to be the CEO of the company, even though it says that you're the CEO of the company.
gosh.
Huge fight breaks out.
Mm.
Huge fight breaks out. Um, Initially, um and these two people that got along incredibly well, now they're saying like, oh, it's like I don't even know who this person is anymore.
So they
I
feel
thought,
that each cheated on them, like just
well,
because of.
one person who obviously the agreement was much more in favor of was like, well, the terms have changed and that's okay. And the other one is like, well, no, like I'm a person that actually incredibly important. Like, we had this verbal agreement. You told me these things are true. And so now this person doesn't trust that person. And the other person is obviously in a much more favorable position. So sometimes this is the way that things shake out. So the big learning lesson, the moral of the story there is, first of all, don't download agreements off of the internet and just sign them, because once there is, and so that's the other piece of the story. Now
Hmm?
that the agreement is here, now they have to live by that agreement.
Oh yeah.
And so the other founder is like, "Hey, that's not what we said verbally." And the guy's like, "Well, that's not what the agreement says."
Yeah. And the agreement, probably there is the clause. So if there were any agreements mutually or blah blah blah, they don't have any force anymore after signing this particular agreement. Period.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, the big learning lesson, don't just grab agreements off of the internet and sign them, because once it's in place, it actually sets the stage. You really don't want to change the governing documents too much. Obviously, when investors come in, they're going to, change the governing documents based on the fact that the investor is going to be added to the company, and so they may make some minor changes to, those governing documents. But it's incredibly difficult to change the governing documents once they're in place. So you
Would
really want to make sure that document actually accurately reflects exactly what the terms of the understanding
Yeah.
are.
Okay, I try to imagine the situation when founders are really short on money. Let's say they don't know that it could cost like only 2,500, but let's say they assume that, oh gosh, it will cost half of a fortune. But would it make sense to hire a consultant? Okay, we downloaded the document, we reviewed it, we don't really understand all the details in it. So maybe it makes sense to hire a lawyer like for an hour or whatever. Just hey, review this doc and tell us what actually it says, in plain English, and if it's okay or not. Or you would still
Okay.
suggest like to take the full package from A to Z from one hand, from someone's hands, really prepared, tailored to our case.
So I'm a lawyer for entrepreneurs, and I am an entrepreneur myself. And so here is my thought process with respect to this. ChatGPT is better than no agreement at all.
Yeah, yeah, but not far from perfect.
And
Yeah.
far from, okay, so I'm gonna give you the scale, right?
Okay.
So ChatGPT is better than no agreement at all. Hiring a lawyer for an hour of consulting is better than a ChatGPT
ChatGPT.
agreement.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then hiring a lawyer to actually do the agreement and help you work through it is better than all of those things. So that is kind of the
Yeah.
scale of how people should approach it. So if all you have is the ability to hire a lawyer to consult with you on the agreement, or a consultant, absolutely do that. If you don't actually even have the capability for that, sure, go to Rocket Lawyer and, download a template off of there and use that. If you don't have the ability to do that, sure, then, you probably shouldn't be building a business, but some people are there, but, you know, then go to ChatGPT and, download your template off of ChatGPT. But really, as I mentioned, it's incredibly important that that document that you get into place accurately reflects exactly what you want it to
Agreed.
and the terms of your understanding, because once it's in place, it's incredibly difficult to change.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And I would like to get back to the second part of our today's topic. Yeah, co-founders agreement. We already touched the ground, like when we are looking for fundraising. That's a full stop if you don't have it. Like if you want to go for Series A. But is it actually necessary if we just want to go into the US market? Let's say the startup is in Europe, yeah, UK, Germany, Lithuania, any country, and maybe they already done a sale or two in United States. Maybe they are looking like to establish like either a company there, I don't know, or hire some employees or whatever. But they see we already have some kind of traction in that country. This is our like prospective market. We want to double down actually on that. When do we need to have the co-founders agreement? Let's say we have our mutual agreement and maybe written in email, maybe slicing pie or any kind of, but it's not professional. It's ChatGPT case. Let's say like we did that with ChatGPT. That's fine for us. When and why we should do the professional way of co-founders agreement in terms of getting into US market?
Yeah, so in terms of getting into the US market, I mean, you're gonna, open an entity in the US. And that entity, in order to have a bank account, for example, you have to have an operating agreement.
Mm.
You're not going to be able
Yeah.
to open a bank account with without an operating agreement in the United States or, bylaws if it's a C corp. So some aspect of as I meant, the operating agreement contains a lot of the terms often that the co-founder agreement is going to contain. And so if you're not going to be able to open a bank account in the United States without an operating agreement, you already are going to have to do the work of getting an operating agreement in place. And if that's the case, that means that that is the time that, as I mentioned, you don't want to have an agreement in place that doesn't accurately reflect what the
Mm.
terms are going to be from that point forward. So if
Mm.
you have to have the operating agreement or the bylaws to open a bank account, that's the time that you really should, hire a lawyer or work with a consultant to get it
Mm.
into place.
So until we actually sell our software from our home market, let's say in Europe, in Germany, France, whatever the country is, we don't have entity in United States. It's not a must for us to have the co-founders agreement because, well, we don't need bank account, we don't need entity there. But if we want to establish fully in the United States, like to stand on 2 feet, it's a must. Yeah, and there's no way
Absolutely.
to go around that. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, got it. So, is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience? Maybe some tips, tricks, or any possible traps to avoid with
Yeah.
co-founders agreement?
Yeah, so we touched briefly on, one of the ways, two of the ways that people can distribute equity. So you talked about slicing the pie. I talked about, the standard, which is like, two founders just come to some sort of agreement, some negotiated agreement around the equity. We talked about, one of the challenges that I often see with respect to equity, where one founder puts in more effort than the other, what you described as scratching your nose. There are also various different variations on the split the pie. Um, so there's like weighted contribution model, which is very similar to splitting the pie, where people just adjust the equity split proportionally based on these weighted contributions, which are equivalent to these slices of pie. Another is, dynamic adjustable equity, which is another variation of splitting the pie where there's like metrics. So, for example, milestone metrics, customer acquisition, product development, these sorts of things. Equity adjusts based on those predetermined metrics. So, these are just like some other ways to explore splitting the equity. There's performance-based vesting. So for example, if like you're a technology founder, if you hit certain product milestones, your equity can vest upon hitting those milestones. So at MVP stage, at alpha stage, at beta stage, at full launch, these sorts of milestones. There's role-based splits. So, CEO gets this amount of equity, COO gets this amount of equity, so
Yeah,
on and
so
so
so it's
forth.
not so personal anymore because if you take that position, if you lead that position, well, you deserve and you get it. It's not just because you are my better friend than another one co-founder, so you get more out of that. No,
That's right.
it's role based. Okay, I like it, and I haven't heard that very often. So I heard that a couple of times probably, but usually people forget because hey, we are friends, we are three friends, and let's split, 33, 33, 33 kind of like approach. That's it. And no more details into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the role-based equity distribution is something that we see a lot, especially for later stage companies. Like, okay, because you're the CEO, we want to make this compensation package incredibly attractive to you, and so we're going to offer you, this kind of very attractive equity compensation plan. So we tend to see it definitely in very later stage companies where certain roles are allotted, not necessarily like a percentage of the company, but like a good amount of equity is offered for that incoming C-suite executive. So that's typically where we really see that one a lot. I honestly don't see role based the splits for founders. In the early stage, I have
Mm,
not seen outside of negotiated agreements, I actually haven't really seen founders do any of these other types of equity splits. The only equity splits that I've ever seen
what's the
are
best?
I'm going to get this percentage, I'm going to get this number of shares, you're going to get this number of shares, and it's agreed upon between the founders. And then the last one, but I just wanted to propose, I just wanted to show people that there
Yeah.
are many different ways
Wider
to,
options, not
yes,
just like a narrow point of view that either A or B. No, there is the whole from A to Z option base.
that's right. And the last one is a points-based system. These are all just variations of slicing the pie. So certain contributions are allotted a certain number of points, and as founders rack up the points, they're tallied to calculate, the percentage of equity that they receive. So these are the various different ways that equity can be distributed. Another thing that I really would like to share with the audience is the importance of um, having the conversation around roles.
Okay.
So in the startup world, I think, especially when there's friends involved, I hear this a lot. Oh, we don't have hierarchy at our startup. Like roles aren't important. I hear this like all the time from
Because it's
founders
early stage, so they
because
don't.
it's early stage.
Yeah.
That's right. But what ends up happening is as the business continues on, because that conversation around roles hasn't been had, because that conversation around responsibilities hasn't been had, that lack of organizational structure actually starts to become a problem. And my suggestion is, as I mentioned from the very beginning, have the conversations earlier rather than later. Who's going to be the CEO? This is one that we actually see a problem around a lot. And how this problem manifests is that if there are two co-founders, both of them run the business thinking that they are actually the CEO of the business, and in the back of their minds, they
But they don't
believe that
tell each other that they
they don't
think that
tell
they.
each other, but they just
Gosh.
act like they are. And it
Oh.
and it's okay until it's not. It's okay until it's not. And when it becomes not is when the fact that they're not having this conversation actually starts to create tension for them. There isn't a clear leadership delineation. They don't have a mechanism for decision making.
Mhm.
And if there isn't a co-founders agreement in place, there,
You are getting locked in the situation, and it's not about just like competitors out competing you. You are lagging, like you are ruining your own business with that kind of like situation.
yeah, for startups, decision making is incredibly important. And being able to quickly make decisions is incredibly important. That's actually what gives a startup competitive advantage. And a lack of decision making, like governing rules, results in the two founders actually not having a clear way. And so decisions may get pushed down the line, for example. They may sweep things under the rug because of this kind of power struggle between the two founders that haven't had this conversation. And it just makes, again, for unpleasant dynamics, as opposed to imagine how much cleaner it is from the very beginning of the relationship with your co-founder to be like, hey, listen, I'm going to be the CEO here. You're going to be the COO. This is why I think that's the case. Or, you're the
Yep.
CTO. And as CTO, these are going to be your responsibilities. This is how we're going to make decisions. Which brings me, to the second point is understanding what needs to be decided by the founders, what needs to be decided by the board of directors, what needs
Mhm.
to be decided by the shareholders. There are certain things that by law shareholders have to decide, and then, there are certain things by law that the board of directors have to decide. And oftentimes the founders are going to be responsible for the day-to-day decisions. That's more company policy in terms of, okay, you're the CEO, here are the day-to-day decisions that you're going to be responsible for making decisions on. You're the CTO, these are the day-to-day decisions that you're going to be responsible for making decisions on. Oftentimes shareholders by law have to, there has to be some sort of approval percentage around mergers and acquisitions, selling the company, that sort of thing. Appointing board of directors is another thing that the shareholders are going to have to vote on. And then the board of directors will often have to vote on things like financings, appointment of key executives, that sort of thing. So that'll be outside of the purview of the
And
founders.
I already feel like the frustration of those who are listening to this. Oh gosh, there's so much stuff
So
to
much,
know and so much stuff to
so
do.
much.
It's not just to build the product and sell the product. Gosh, there's a lot more, and it's always better. And um, when I was younger, I was trying to do everything on my own. I tried, to work harder, tried to be smarter, and tried to learn the thing and try to implement that. But then I came up to one quote, and I live by that quote up till now. Ask who, not
Mm,
how. Instead of asking how to do that, you will end up, as you mentioned, those founders. They downloaded the template and they ruined their business. That's it. That's not that they are bad persons. That they're not bad people. Probably that's not the case. They simply couldn't get into too much of those details. And ask who could help you to do that faster, better, and probably cheaper than you would do on your own. And some people actually uh, call me a marketing expert, a startup advisor, and that kind of stuff. That's cool. But I also have mentors. I also go to training, to coaching. Why? Why do you go to others there? Because I don't want to learn from my own mistakes when I can learn from somebody else's mistakes. When I can hire someone to save me, to show me the shortcut, how to do this or that stuff where I'm not expert at. That's it. So, guys, my advice is you already heard Omeed. And even for me, it became more and more complicated. And it's, hey, Omeed, come on, guys, stop it. When I have this problem, or when I see that this problem is arising in the horizon, I want to go and talk with you and to say, hey, maybe this is the right time when you can help me. If it's not yet that time, okay, just let me know what I need to prepare or when it would be the right time for me. And our time is like running, to an end. If there is anything else to share, so please don't hesitate and share. But I would also like to remind about your gift once again, if somebody joined it later on, so how they could get that amazing resource, which is much better than ChatGPT solutions.
Yeah, so the last thing that I want to share is actually to that chat GPT point and to the point that you made. So the lawyer is actually really going to be an expert in navigating the conversation. So actually one of the things how I started was it's really important for co-founders to have the difficult and truthful conversations, around what the relationship will look like. If you don't feel that you're, you know, capable or that you have, that your skills in having those difficult conversations around the relationship are that strong, it's actually a perfect opportunity to hire a lawyer because a lawyer is going to be incredibly well versed in bringing these things up for conversation and helping the founders to navigate through the difficulties of coming to decision around them. And so that's really the benefit of working with someone like a consultant or a lawyer. It's so that, if you don't have a lot of experience having the difficult conversations that will be necessary to get the co-founder agreement in place, the lawyer can help mediate, the lawyer can help navigate those sorts of conversations, and that you won't get from ChatGPT or a template. And that's really the benefit of hiring a lawyer. And so if you're out there and you're listening to this video, whether you're watching the replay or whether you're watching live, message me, co-founder on LinkedIn, and I will respond with a template, a co-founder agreement template that will be a free gift for you for tuning in and for watching up to this point. And yeah, message me co-founder on LinkedIn, and I'll definitely respond with a co-founder agreement template that you can use. Obviously, that template is just a template. So, I have to kind of give the disclaimer. That doesn't mean that I'm your lawyer. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean
and that you are
that
secured by that agreement by
that
all
that
means.
agreement is going to
Yeah.
be airtight. You know, use it at your own discretion. Make sure that you consult with a lawyer with respect to your specific situation. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. So Thank you, Donatus, for having me on today to, talk about co-founder agreements. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And thank you, Omeed, for being a guest here. We actually had some technical issues, and we still have these technical issues. That damn LinkedIn. Maybe like the next time we will go
Yeah,
live
maybe
on
next
the
five
event.
times we'll get it
Maybe,
finally.
but at least we were live streamed on the profile. So I saw that more than 20 people at the peak time they were watching for this. But I will obviously share the recording with the audience. I will put it on either on Vimeo or YouTube, make it accessible. So anyone who is interested in setting up the relationship with co-founders, you already have really valuable resource from Omeed, that the co-founders template, the co-founders agreement template. So you use it, use this chance and get that document. Usually it costs some money, so don't waste that. And if you are still in the very early stage and you are just about to launch into the market, or you're preparing to launch into the market, as I mentioned in the description of the event, I will share free training with you. So it's top 8% SaaS launch strategy. So what those most successful startups who don't fail within 3 years, those top 8% startups do, you can either, comment me, go to market, and I will send you the link. And if it's possible, I will put the link on any media where we will share this video. So you can go and grab that training absolutely for free, and to avoid those mistakes from marketing side and avoid relationship ruining issues by using the Omeed's provided co-founders agreement template. Yeah. So thanks everyone for being here, and my most biggest thanks goes to you, Omeed, for using your time to share knowledge with us. And I already saw in comments when we were already live here that some people share that, oh, this is really amazing, this is really valuable. So thank you for providing true value. Yeah. So thanks, Omeed.
Absolutely. And I hope I didn't overwhelm anyone out there with all of the information. And
I know
it's
that
a lot,
you could have gone even further away
even
with
more.
that.
I absolutely could have. I
Okay.
definitely could have.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks everyone, and yeah, bye.